The focus of this week's readings on Indigenous cultures and education for Indigenous peoples was a surprising direction for the class as far as I was concerned. I enjoyed it immensely, and all the more so because here in Arizona, of course, there are many Indigenous peoples that are found here and are active here. A few different nations. So a lot of, on the one hand, areas that were familiar to me in a sense, and also areas that suggest opportunities for research in the future. I'll make a comment that I don't often make, which is I actually found the textbook reading to be the most interesting of the readings we were assigned. As I went through it, it very much resonated with me, some of the differences, and especially the emphasis on a holistic way of understanding the world. I think that's correct, that Western culture is almost unique in the world for not having that kind of holistic orientation towards knowledge. One of the definitions that we found in that book is the term indigenous itself. It said the term indigenous refers to the original inhabitants of a particular geographic territory or area, as well as to collective indigenous peoples internationally. I don't know if that is a satisfactory definition, because the people that we consider indigenous, for the most part, had antecedent peoples that either migrated or were conquered or died out. The people we're calling indigenous are indigenous in comparison to Western powers that came along later, for example, the English and Americans in Hawaii. However, there's perhaps historically lost cases where the people we're considering indigenous were actually the usurpers, or at least the successors to even earlier cultures. So it's not a hugely important point, but technically speaking, I don't know if we can really get to a truly indigenous people. We simply can get to contemporary, earlier, and maybe earlier still. Anyway, getting back to the discussion, particularly in Voices from the Bridge, I thought there was a lot of good material highlighting the differences in appeal to empiricism versus authority. A little bit interesting that the science textbooks actually didn't rely nearly as much on empirical evidence as they urged their readers to. Again, the difference between a holistic as opposed to reductionist way to go about learning and knowing. The whole thing is very interesting. I do think that, and the point is made again in the textbook when it talks about the fourth way, and again in the film with the Hawaiian students in school, that it's not just a matter of restoring some of these indigenous insights into indigenous curriculums, but there's also the possibility of enriching the Western canon with indigenous insights, and I think that's really the way to go. I think that the ultimate, and maybe this is a uniquely American ideal, but I think the ultimate is to take the best of all the cultures and synthesize them into a greater whole. So all of the instances of Indigenous education that I read about, none of them talked about utterly abandoning the Western standards of education, but rather to incorporate Indigenous insights. If that's the case, then the Indigenous people have the wisdom of their own culture plus that of the West. So the West becomes the area with the most impoverished education because it does not have this multicultural input. So my recommendation, not that anyone was asking for it, but my recommendation would be to incorporate the Indigenous wisdom into the Indigenous curriculum, and also to draw from it even in the Western curriculum. And I think that's what the textbook was saying, at least the author of that particular chapter. Looking forward to class tonight. Have a good day.